Okay, great. So now we are going to look at the different note values and rests. So let's start with what we already know, and that is note values like the semi-brief. Okay, so what was added is, of course, the brief, and that is twice as long as the semi-brief. Okay, so I wrote it on the board. So there's the brief, so you can see it looks like a semi-brief, but it's got the two lines on either side of the noted. Okay, so if you split a brief into two, you have two semi-briefs. Okay, and the rest I'm not going to revise. You already know them, the minim, the crotchet, the quaver. So then I just drew from a quaver here on the board until we get to the hemi, demi, semi-quaver. So let's have a look at it. So you know the quaver, I don't need to introduce it to you. And then you have the semi-quaver, you also know that. It's also known as the 16th note. Okay, I just wrote 16th in numbers, but maybe you can write it out. If you are going to write, say for example, UNISA, it's fine to either use the British English, in other words, to refer to words like the quaver, the semi-quaver, the minim. But if you're going to, and then you can also use the term 16th note, 8th note. But if you write your ABRSM exam, I would suggest that you stick with the British English. So, in other words, just the quaver, the crotchet, those names. So, the moment that you use numbers, the 16th note, the half note, the whole note, those are the American terms. Okay. If you forget, they're still going to mark it right in your exam. Okay. So, I just thought of sharing that with you guys. Okay, so let's have a look at these note values. So the semiquaver is known as the 16th note as well. And that means that if you think of a cake, okay, and you split the cake in half, you've got two halves. So that's why you've got a whole note. You've got a half note. That's when you split the whole note into two. If you split it into quarters, you've got the quarter note. And that brings us to the quaver, which is also an eighth. So a quaver, it is an eighth of a semi-brief. A semi-quaver is a 16th of a semi-brief. Okay, and if you split a semi-quaver into two, you get two demi-semi-quavers. And then it's also known as a 32nd note. So a 32nd note literally takes up a 32nd of a whole note, and you get 32 32nd notes in a whole note. Okay, good. And then if we split a demi-semi-quaver into two, we have two hemi-demi-semi-quavers. I actually wrote the whole name on the board. So it's like the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious of music. Okay, so hemi-demi-semi-quaver. So just make sure that you don't get confused between the two, that you don't say a demi, semi-quaver, something like that. Okay, so just make sure that you say it correctly. But of course, you're also welcome to use the term a 64th note. Why? Because you have 64th notes in a whole note or in a semi-brief. Okay, so let's just quickly look at your rests. So you already know that semi-brief rest and the learning music. I thought the semi-brief rest counts more, it's a bit bigger, so that's why it just stands a bit higher. Okay, so it always, if you just work with one with a single melody, then the minim rest is going to stand on the third line. So your brief rest looks like this. Okay, so it's almost like a square bit tighter maybe. In your third space, your crotchet rest you already know, the quaver rest you know, the semi-quaver rest you know, and then when it gets to the demi-semi-quaver and hemi-demi-semi-quaver rest, please just note that we move them a bit up just so that we can fit in all the little feet. Okay, so the quaver and the semi-quaver rest starts by touching the fourth line, while your demi-semi-quaver and hemi-demi-semi-quaver starts by touching the fifth line. And that's basically the note values and rests that are prescribed for grade 12.